Imagine a company so powerful that it was single-handedly responsible for 25% of an entire nation's economic growth. A company that paid more in taxes than all other corporations in its country, combined. At its peak, its annual budget was larger than the GDP of countries like Morocco or Ecuador. It wasn't in Silicon Valley, it wasn't in New York or Tokyo. It operated from the frozen edge of Europe. For anyone born after 2010, the name Nokia might sound like a museum piece, an indestructible nostalgic relic that became an internet meme. But the story of Nokia isn't a meme, it is a corporate Greek tragedy. In the year 2000, an executive said in an interview with zero irony, "Our goal is to figure out how to put a mobile phone in the hand of every human being on Earth, from the Wall Street executive to the fisherman in India." They weren't dreaming. They were doing it. For every 2 phones sold on the planet, 1 was a Nokia. They had won the game of global capitalism. So, how is it possible? How did an organization with the best engineers, infinite money, and total market dominance lose 90% of its value in just 6 years? The answer isn't just about technology. The answer lies in the shadows of its glass corridors, a silent cancer made of fear, arrogance, and a collective blindness that infected the brightest minds in the world. To understand the death of Nokia, we first need to understand how improbable its birth was. The story begins in 1865, not with microchips, but with trees. Frederick Idestam, a mining engineer, founded a paper mill on the banks of the Nokian-Virta River. That is where the name came from, Nokia. For almost a century, Nokia was an industrial Frankenstein. If you lived in Finland in the 60s or 70s, Nokia was part of your life, but not in your pocket. It was in the rubber boots you wore in the rain, in the tires of your car, in the electrical cables in your walls. They even made gas masks for the army. But being a conglomerate that does a little of everything comes at a price. By the 80s, Nokia was bloated, bureaucratic, and inefficient. The company depended heavily on exports to the neighboring Soviet Union. When the Berlin Wall fell and the Soviet Union collapsed, Finland's economy went into freefall. Nokia was on the brink of total bankruptcy. The pressure was unbearable. In 1988, the visionary CEO Kari Kairamo, the man who tried to modernize the company, committed suicide. Nokia was leaderless, penniless, and directionless. Shareholders wanted to sell the company in pieces to Ericsson or Siemens. It was in this moment of desperation that Jorma Ollila emerged. In 1992, Ollila made one of the riskiest decisions in business history. A decision that today would be considered madness. He said, "Let's sell everything. Forget the rubber, forget the TVs, forget the cables." He bet the entire future of the company on a new digital and globally untested technology called GSM. The company board thought it was suicide. Cell phones back then were heavy bricks used only by bankers in luxury cars. No one believed that an average person would need to carry a phone in their pocket all day long. Ollila disagreed. He saw a future where voice was digital. The bet paid off, and it paid off big. While Motorola, the American leader, was still insisting on old analog technology, Nokia arrived first in the digital era. Call quality was crystal clear, text messages emerged, and suddenly, Nokia was no longer a failed boot factory. It was the spearhead of global technology. The giant of the North had awakened, and it was hungry. Between 1996 and 2005, Nokia lived through what economists call the golden era. They didn't just sell products, they defined human behavior. The Nokia 5110 brought customizable, colorful covers. The phone became fashion. The Nokia 3310 became a legend for its durability. And of course, there was Snake. While you were trying to beat your high score in Snake, Nokia was printing money. Stock value went up 500%. They launched the first phone with a camera, the first with mobile internet, the first real smartphone, the Communicator series, which looked like a pocket computer. In 2006, Forbes magazine put Nokia on the cover with the headline, "Can anyone catch the cell phone king?" The answer seemed to be an obvious no. But if you could look through the walls of the headquarters in Espoo, you would see that the king was sick. With explosive growth, Nokia turned into a bureaucratic monster. There were hundreds of committees to approve anything. Revolutionary ideas died in PowerPoint presentations, but the worst poison was the culture of fear. Later investigations in the book Operation Elop revealed a shocking truth. Middle managers were terrified of bringing bad news to the directors. Top executives like the new CEO Olli-Pekka Kallasvuo were known for shooting the messenger. If you said the software had problems, you were seen as negative and pushed aside. So everyone lied. Reports went up saying, "Everything is perfect, the launch will be on time." The board toasted to success, unaware that the technical foundation of the company was rotten. The heart of the problem had a name: Symbian. Nokia's operating system was old. It was made for simple phones, and Nokia tried to patch it for the internet era. It was like trying to build a skyscraper on a foundation of rotten wood. To add a simple zoom function to the camera, engineers took months of coding. Meanwhile, in Silicon Valley, a secret team was about to change the rules of the game forever. When Steve Jobs walked off the stage, the tech world was in ecstasy. But in Finland, the reaction was cold. Nokia engineers bought the first iPhones, took them to the lab, and dismantled them. The report they handed to the board was one of the greatest miscalculations in corporate history. They said, "The device is fragile. The screen will shatter if it hits the ground. The antenna is poorly designed and calls drop," which was true. And it costs $500. No one will pay that for a phone without a physical keyboard. They analyzed the iPhone as a phone. And as a phone, the Nokia N95 was technically better. It had 3G, a better camera, and GPS. What they didn't understand is that the iPhone wasn't a phone. It was a pocket computer that by chance made calls. Nokia ignored user experience. They thought people wanted hardware, battery, signal. Apple proved that people wanted software, apps, easy internet, a touchscreen. Nokia's answer came 2 years later with the Nokia N97. It was sold as the iPhone killer. The N97 was a humiliating disaster. The system was slow. The touchscreen had to be pressed hard, using resistive technology or with a stylus pen. It was frustrating. A Nokia executive admitted years later, "The N97 was a tremendous disappointment for us and for the consumers. That was the moment we lost the public's trust." In 2008 and 2009, Google entered the fight with Android. Samsung and HTC embraced Google's system. Nokia was alone, stranded on its Symbian island that no one wanted to develop for anymore. The ship was sinking and the band played on. They needed a savior. But the man they hired to save the company turned out to be its gravedigger. In September 2010, Nokia broke a sacred tradition. For the first time in 145 years, they named a CEO who wasn't Finnish. Stephen Elop, a former Microsoft executive, arrived with a mission to blow up the bureaucracy, and he blew it up. But perhaps he blew up the wrong thing. In February 2011, Elop wrote one of the most infamous memos in corporate history. He compared Nokia to a worker on a burning oil platform in the middle of the North Sea. He wrote, "We are standing on a burning platform. The fire is consuming everything. We have to jump into the freezing waters to survive." The metaphor was powerful. The effect was catastrophic. By telling the world that Nokia's products were a burning platform, Elop committed the Osborne effect. He killed sales of current phones before having the new ones ready. No one wants to buy a phone from a company whose own CEO says it is dying. And then came the fatal decision. Nokia had 3 doors. Door number 1, stick with the old Symbian, certain death. Door number 2, adopt Google's Android like Samsung did, probable survival. Door number 3, make an exclusive partnership with Microsoft and use Windows Phone. A high-stakes gamble. Elop chose Microsoft. This is where the conspiracy theory is born. Many analysts and former employees believe that Stephen Elop was a Trojan Horse, an undercover agent sent to devalue Nokia so Microsoft could buy it for pennies on the dollar. There is no legal proof of this, but the numbers are suspicious. Under Elop's command, Nokia's market value dropped from 40 billion to less than 10 billion in 3 years. Windows Phone wasn't a bad system. It was fast, beautiful, and secure. The problem was the apps. No Instagram, no official YouTube, no Snapchat. Nokia created amazing devices like the Lumia line with spectacular cameras. But trying to sell a smartphone without apps in 2012 was like trying to sell a car without wheels. In September 2013, the inevitable happened. Microsoft announced the purchase of Nokia's mobile division. The price, $7.2 billion. It sounds like a lot of money. But remember, years earlier, Nokia was worth $300 billion. It was sold for 2% of its peak value. It was a total fire sale. In Finland, the sale was treated as national mourning. Thousands of engineers were fired. The city of Espoo suffered a brutal economic hollowing out. Stephen Elop went back to Microsoft and received a $25 million bonus for the transaction. To the Finns, that was the final insult. But fate has a cruel sense of humor. The purchase was a disaster for Microsoft too. 2 years later, Microsoft's new CEO, Satya Nadella, fired almost all former Nokia employees and killed the Lumia line. The dream was over. $7 billion thrown in the trash. However, Nokia didn't die. The part of the company that was not sold, the Networks and Infrastructure Division, survived. Free from the dead weight of mobile phones, they reinvented themselves. Today, if you use 5G or 4G, there's a good chance your data is passing through a Nokia antenna. They went back to being an infrastructure company, invisible and profitable, exactly as they were in the 19th century. There is an urban legend that during the press conference for the sale, an executive wept and said, "We didn't do anything wrong, but somehow we lost." That quote is likely false, but the feeling is real and dangerous. The truth is, they did do many things wrong. Nokia died from success. They became so addicted to the easy profits of their bricks that they were afraid to invent the future. They treated the iPhone like a joke and Android like a nuisance. In the business world, there are only 2 types of companies, the quick and the dead. Nokia's lesson cost $300 billion, and the question remains, who is the next Nokia? Is it Tesla, Google, Facebook? Let me know your opinion in the comments below. If you thought Nokia's fall was brutal, you need to hear the story of the company that had the chance to buy Netflix for pennies and said no. But that you will see in the next, shall we say, collapse.